Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football. We're continuing with our 2022 season previews as we take a look at the LSU Tigers. Still, the first thing we need to talk about is the new head coach. Probably the biggest splash, maybe second to Lincoln Riley in the head coaching carousel in the offseason. I actually like the fit. A lot of people, because it's a weird fit coming from Notre Dame, he did the fake accent, he was dancing with the players, and it looked weird from people outside of the program. Dill, what's your feel on this coaching hire?
I frankly think we'd hear a lot less of this bad fit talk if people just didn't dislike Brian Kelly as much as they did.
Yes.
And he's a dislikable character. I think he comes off very just not, I don't know, people don't, we'll keep going back to the playoffs even though we get boat raced every time and we're way better than this. And he's just always been slightly dislikable. So I think if he wasn't that way, people wouldn't be on him so much. But at the end of the day, he's a top 5 football coach, I think, at this moment. I mean, I won very consistently at a Notre Dame program that really had no success before him going back to the late 90s. So I think he did as good of a job as anyone could have done at that program.
And he's been one of the more successful coaches that had to stop before in Cincinnati. He has proven to be a consistently successful coach. He makes the move to Notre Dame because he needs more talent. I think he's seeing that I can't recruit the way I want to recruit at Notre Dame. You go to LSU, you pretty much have one of the easier recruiting jobs in the country. You get first dibs on pretty much any kid from the state of Louisiana. And Brian Kelly's he has a talented team, and we're going to get into it, but he's going to be able to amass a lot of talent. Guys, before we get into the team heading into 2022, just wanted to say thank you for all the support. The support you guys have shown has been absolutely awesome. We appreciate it. We look forward to talking football with you guys into the 2022 college football season. Dill, it starts with the quarterback here with LSU. This is the biggest hole I have on the program. You got Miles Brennan, the veteran, Jaden Daniels, the transfer, and then Garrett Nussmeier, the young, talented, the youngster. Who is your early edge to start at QB1 when you go up against Florida State?
My inclination is they're going Jaden Daniels, and that's simply because none of these guys have played great college football, including Jaden Daniels, but I guess if you were to rank who's played the best, I think it's Jaden Daniels. And it just seems like Brian Kelly isn't going to want to go through a year where he's 5-7 or something really weak. And again, Miles Brennan, I don't think has shown enough. Nussmeier, you just don't know. He played one game last year, and it's not like that's Brian Kelly's guy. That he came in under the Ogeron regime. So Jaden Daniels is really the only guy who Brian Kelly brought in and as his guy. And he's the only one who's played at a reasonably high level of college football, albeit not particularly high.
I know Brian Kelly put a lot of time and effort into keeping Miles Brennan in the program, so I guess you could dub him as your guy too. But I think my inclination is Garrett Nussmeier. I think you know what you got with Jaden Daniels. He's not that great. Didn't look that good in the spring game. Miles Brennan, you get one more year of him, and that'll be average SEC play at best. Garrett Nussmeier is kind of the unknown wild card who looked the best in the spring game, is probably the most talented out of all of them, maybe barring Jaden Daniels. But again, we saw what he was about. And I don't think his style is going to work in the SEC. It's easy to be the best athlete in the Pac-12 and kind of play the way he liked to play. When you got Will Anderson, Nolan Smith, guys like that trying to chase you down, I think that athleticism and relying on that athleticism like he did in the Pac-12 probably doesn't translate. No.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make an argument that Jaden Daniels is going to light up at LSU. But at the end of the day, whoever starts is probably going to be kind of a part-time filler for Walker Howard, who's kind of seems like going to be Brian Kelly's guy to really get this program going. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to play one of the older guys, just let them play for a year and then hopefully they're ready to go with Walker Howard, because that just feels like the guy who's going to come in and Brian Kelly hopes is going to spark this whole machine back up.
Yeah, I agree. Now, the good news is whoever is starting at quarterback is going to have one of the better wide receiving cores in the country. It starts with Kayshon Boutte, who is your number 1 wide receiver heading into the 2023 NFL draft. He's my number 2. Don't need to spend much time on him. If he stays healthy, he's going to be one of the best wide receivers in the country. Was one of the best wide receivers last year. But he also has some guys that you feel really excited about. Dill, I'm going to let you handle this because you did a lot of watching LSU's offense back. I know you like Jack Bech a lot, My guy is kind of that Brian Thomas Jr. type of guy, longer, kind of the vertical kind of guy. Which one of these guys, kind of outside of Kayshon Boutte, who we know is a stud, is going to really step up here?
I think, to be very honest, I think you got 4 guys who can play at a really high level, and I am a huge fan of Jack Betch. I think he adds something Boutte doesn't. He played a little more underneath, really good once he gets the ball in his hand. And I think that's important, especially when you don't think you're going to have like lights out quarterback play.
Yes.
So he's a guy I'm looking at. I think Jare Jenkins really good. And yeah, Brian Thomas. Like, they're just like, you got four guys sitting behind Kayshon Boutte, who I think can play legit high level football. So you just do have like kind of a overload of weapons, you could say.
And it's like a numbers game. We'll talk about similar numbers game when we talk about the secondary. So more than one of these guys are going to be good. And this LSU wide receiver room is going to be talented. The running back room is also an interesting room. You have John Emery Jr., a former top 15 guy nationally, been waiting for him to break out. You haven't seen it yet. I think he was in academic problems last year. He's talented. And I'm excited to see him kind of have that RB1 spot. Noah Kane comes in as a transfer, is also a top 100 guy in that 2019 class. They'll got to keep your eye on him. You didn't watch as much of the spring game as me. Armani Goodwin, he's coming into his second year at the program, and this dude's an absolute stud. 5'9", he's built well, but he's got some blazing speed. The running back room is going to be good.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It is like obviously a talented room. I mean, Noah Kane was pretty much the clear starter on Penn State last year, and obviously going to come in as probably going to be more of a 2-headed and maybe even a 3-headed backfield, which at this point in college football is what you're doing. I mean, unless you have a Bijan Robinson, and there's like 2 of those.
Emery could be that. I really do think so. I'm excited to see what he looks like, but I do agree if John Emery still continues to maybe not reach that potential, you have guys like Noah Kane.
I'm not going to lie. Like, we're in the senior year, and we haven't seen like even the versioning of.
Yes.
And I'm not like, I'm saying there's like 5 guys who play at the level of a Travion Henderson or a Bijan. Like, there's just nobody who does it. And if you're not one of the 2 teams that has those guys, like, it is good to have a good stable. I think you probably do have 3 guys you can count on.
Now, the run game has to deal a lot with this offensive line that really, really struggled early last year. I mean, they could not run the ball. You look at that early schedule. UCLA, they struggled mightily to run the ball. They struggled to run the ball against Auburn as a good front seven. Mississippi State, even, they struggled. Like, the run game was really weak, and you combine that with kind of questionable quarterback play. Max Johnson wasn't horrible for them. It was bad. Now, the offensive line this year, I'm optimistic about, but I think it hinges on, can Will Campbell play at left tackle as a true freshman? If he can, it answers a lot of your questions. BK looked at this roster and said, we need to address the offensive line. I want to run the football better. He goes and gets Tremont Shorts from Eastern Tennessee. He's a guy that was an All-American at the FCS level. And then Miles Frazier, one of the higher interior offensive line transfer portal recruits, I guess you might say. They're going to be good, but I do think it hinges on, if you have a guy like Will Campbell who can play left tackle at a high level, the offensive line won't be a problem.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you're not returning anybody, and that probably is a good thing because the unit just wasn't even close. And it just wasn't even talented enough, I don't think. So, yeah, you turned it over, probably get a fresh start. And I think at the end of the day, that's really going to be a good thing for LSU because they really just needed some fresh blood in that unit.
All right, so we talked about the concerns we have with this LSU team. We're going to talk about a part of the LSU team we don't have pretty much any concerns. That's the defense. This is going to be a top 10 defense in the country. When you're that talented, you look at a team like Georgia last year. I'm not saying they're as good as Georgia was last year up front, but they're pretty damn close. I love this defensive line, and it starts with your 2 edge rushers, BJ Ojulari, who is going to be in contention for a first-round pick if he just keeps up what he's doing. And then Ali Gay probably wouldn't be on LSU if he didn't get hurt. He probably would be in the NFL by now. You have 2 legit studs at the edge position. And then what I even love more, Dill, is that interior defensive line is stacked, but it's deep. Jaquelin Roy, I like a lot. He should have played more last year. And then Mason Smith dominated at points as a true freshman. You don't see many 18-year-olds dominate on the inside like Mason Smith. And then you add Mekhi Wingo from Missouri, who's also a stud. Defense line's elite.
Yeah, and that's what you got some guys who played like elite football as really young players. I mean, sophomore, freshman. And yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think Mason Smith, like when he comes out in the draft, you might be talking about him like a Derek Brown or someone like that.
Yeah.
He's really a good-looking young player, and again, I think what you do, I like also on your edge, you got two guys who complement each other. Ali Gay is a little bigger, a little more physical in the run, and then you have a true just alpha dog edge pass rusher in BJ Ojulari, who's a little smaller but like a freak athlete and just he's just a real like a refined pass rusher who's gonna do
that was the exact word. As you were stumbling, I was gonna cut you off and say refined. Because he's a guy that he has all the pass rush moves. Like he looks like he could have gone the NFL last year. That's how refined and improving this guy is. Linebacker spot, you lose a guy like Damone Clark, who was really good for LSU from a production standpoint. Mike Jones Jr., Micah Bakersville. You know what you got in at least Micah Bakersville. I think Mike Jones Jr. I'm high on. I was high on him when he transferred in from Clemson. Hasn't really hasn't played much meaningful football. A guy that I'm really excited for, Dale, Greg Penn. If you watch the spring game, which I know you didn't watch too much of, this dude looks the part. He's long, he's big, he's fast, he's physical. I think he's going to play this year.
Yeah, and my thing is, like, you're getting two guys back who did play a fair amount, especially Micah Bakersville, who was pretty much an every down starter. And I honestly thought Mike Jones Jr., like, he's not much of a step down from the guy they had last year who went to the NFL.
Damone Clark.
And so, like, that's my thought. It's like, okay, so I think those two are pretty interchangeable. Mike Jones might be a little bit better because he does play a little more physical, at least, I think. But you're going to have some wild talent. And Micah Bakersville, to me, is a very Brian Asamoah from Oklahoma. Like, he's a legit pro prospect.
Yeah.
Because he plays all over the field, making plays everywhere, a lot of negative plays. I really think he's being slept on in terms of how we're talking about top linebackers coming into this season.
Yeah, and another guy you have to throw in is Harold Perkins. He's coming in as a true freshman, top 10 guy in the country. He's got the body to play week one. He's going to play. If he stays healthy, like the dude is too talented not to play. I'm just interested to see how much he plays, and that might rely more on like how good does Mike Jones Jr. look. Micah Bakersfield reportedly is in BK's doghouse. So if some of those guys aren't playing, you'll see Harold Perkins at some point. Now, the secondary, this is an interesting topic. They lose, 4 out of their 5 guys who played 400-plus snaps, and that's not even including Derek Stingley, who didn't really play last year much. But you pounded the transfer portal. Now, let's talk about the guys returning. Jay Ward, he's awesome. I think Jay Ward is one of the better safeties in the SEC. And then it's just a litter of transfers who were all extremely good for the most part at their prior stops. And now can LSU plug and play them, and can they stay at that high level? What are you thinking here?
I mean, that's what you got to think. Like, you got guys like Sevyn Banks, who in 2020 looked like he was going to be a possible first-round pick. Yeah. And some other transfers, who obviously you mentioned, just played high-level football. So you got to think you have enough pieces to put together a unit. And frankly, it's not like that LSU defense or secondary played nearly to their potential last year. Like, yeah, they had some big names, but at the end of the day, the production wasn't really there. So I don't see that you should take such a big step back, because you did bring in some real talent to fill in a unit that I think just needed to get better. I think anyone who watched LSU, as much as, guys who are good, like, they just didn't play well enough last year.
Yeah, I mean, you have Jarek Bernard, who was a first-team All-Big 12 guy at Oklahoma State, one of the best defenses in the country last year. Joe Fuchsia, Greg Brooks coming in from Arkansas, both played at a high level. Mekhi Gardner was an all-Sun Belt guy from the University of Louisiana. And then you mentioned Sevyn Banks, who's dripping with talent, just needs to put it together. Guess what? I don't think it matters that much. You just similar to Georgia last year. I don't mean to compare LSU to Georgia in like every way possible, but I'm kind of doing that. Your secondary, Kirby Smart was vocal about the secondary being not good last year. He was concerned about it. It doesn't matter if you have a pass rush that LSU has. It can blanket up a lot of problems you might have in the secondary. I'm not even saying you'll have those problems, but if you do, you have a pass rush that really isn't going to allow quarterbacks to drop back in the pocket and deliver balls in a clean pocket, because there's not going to be a pocket when you're playing LSU. Again, this team, you look back at how they recruited, top 5 pretty much every year for the last 3 years. The team itself is dripping with talent. I think the one question mark is, who is going to be the quarterback deal. I want to start taking a peek at the schedule real quick. It's kind of how we end. I'm seeing a lot of 7.5s for LSU win total. I don't hate it. I mean, the big question, kind of similar to Auburn, is who's going to be throwing the football. This is going to be a big first game. You go, it's a neutral site in New Orleans against Florida State, which I think is a great week 1 matchup. It's not a team that you're going to lose to, I don't think, but it's a team that if you get a win against, you're feeling really, really confident about how you're heading into 2022.
Yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. It's like obviously a brand name that everybody knows, and it's been historic and all that. So yeah, naturally when you beat them, it's not like beating Memphis. It's not like beating Eastern Kentucky, like those smaller schools that you don't really know. Like, yeah, sometimes they're good, but it just doesn't feel the same as going in and beating a Florida State. So I'm kind of with you. I think it's a very winnable game, probably a game they should win, but gets you off on the right foot under the new Brian Kelly era.
Yeah, I guess the only concern is that you might have a quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier who has it, even if Walker Howard starts, like 2 guys potentially who haven't played much meaningful football. And then you have Miles Brennan or Jaden Daniels. You take care of business at Southern, and I think there's a strong possibility we're starting 2-0, and Mississippi State at home. Your first 3 or 4 games are all at home. Mississippi State's very winnable. Quite frankly, I don't see Mississippi State dropping back and throwing against LSU with how good that pass rush is. New Mexico win 4-0 going on the road to Auburn, who has very similar problems that game could be 10-13. Like 2 very good defenses against 2 offenses that you have a lot of question marks about.
Difference is LSU can make some plays. I don't know, maybe you're not looking at an Auburn team that has the explosive potential and some questions at quarterback. So.
Yeah, like Auburn pairs. The problem with Auburn is I love that defense, but they pair a questionable. And the thing is, Auburn's options don't even nearly excite me as much. Like TJ Finley or Zach Calzada, that's kind of puke. I didn't really say that. Hopefully, none of the Auburn fans are listening at this point of the video, but that's bad quarterbacks. And then they don't have any wide receivers. So I think they can take care of business, and I'm a little optimistic in saying that they'll go 4-0 to start their season. Tennessee will be a very good one on the road at Florida, Ole Miss. If you can sneak 1 or 2 of those, you're looking at a 5-2 start, and then you really get into the cracks at Alabama, Arkansas. UAB is not a team to overlook, but you get them at home, and then you finish up. And though this Texas A&M game, again, similar question marks at quarterback, that game is probably going to be whether you have an 8-win season or a 9-win season, or a 9-win season or a 10-win season. That's going to be a big one.
Yeah, and that's probably what you're hoping. I don't think you can realistically expect like a 10-11 win series.
No.
Like maybe you can get to 10 if you have a couple upsets and just take care of everything.
You don't play Georgia. That helps.
If you're at the 8-9 region, I think is a really good season, and it makes you think as an LSU fan, like, all right, we're kind of back on track.
Back on track.
I mean, what Ogeron did for the last 2 years, like it really knocked them back. It was just weird how everything was running. Guys weren't playing. They were leaving. It was just a bizarre. I mean, what from 19 to like 20 and 21, it just really, really strange.
I haven't seen a program fall apart that quickly in a really long time. I mean, everything unraveled in legitimately less than 24 months. From being one of the best teams we've seen in college football history to a team that can barely make a bowl game in 2021. Guys, that'll do it.
Hey, you got the right guy. I think you have the right guy to fix that situation. As much as maybe people, again, harken back, don't like him, he's a winner, and he will, I think, set this program back on track where you kind of want it.
I think he can win national championship with LSU. I mean, he's very, very capable of it. Guys, we appreciate you checking us out again. If you do like the content you're still watching, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate the support, and we'll talk to y'all later.